How are you?
I'm doing all right.
I
It's
was just trying to make me, against all the odds, look as beautiful as possible.
the odds are in your favor, sir.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. I think this is a really good opportunity, Senator. I know a lot of people are really worried about what the tariffs could mean, what Donald Trump presidency could mean. I know in Canada, people are really worried about it. I hear it all the time. People are worried about the tariffs, for example, the threat of tariffs and how that's going to make life harder for Canadian workers, losing jobs. People are worried about the cost of things going up at a time when they're already so squeezed with the cost of living. So I hope people seeing us chatting together, just even the fact that we're trying to find ways to work together, will give people some hope at a time when they need some hope, that there's ways for us to build together and find ways to push back. So I'm really honored that we
Well,
got a chance to chat.
well, thank you very much, and thanks for the good work that you have been doing for so many years. I live, as you know, 50 miles away from the Canadian border.
That's right.
We see Canada as brothers and sisters, Canadian people as our brothers and sisters. And obviously, our goal is to go forward together to improve life for people on both sides of the border. We are not enemies. We are friends, long history, long positive history. We must continue that history against those who, for whatever reason, want to divide us up.
I agree with that. And maybe just to set the stage a bit, Senator, what does it mean on your end? I think it would help people to know what you think the impact of, if we start with the tariffs, what would the impact be on people in your state, in Vermont, and how would it impact the working class in America as a whole?
Well, look, it's hard to answer that question, Jagmeet, because Trump talks in generalities, so we don't know. I believe and have always believed in fair trade policies, policies that benefit workers throughout the world, and not just the large corporations who historically have written these trade agreements. So I want to see, to the degree that we have trade agreements in North America with Canada, Mexico, US, I want to see them benefit workers in all three countries and not just make the people on top even richer. But I can't really answer your question because we don't know yet what Trump is talking about. But the general fear of what Trump is talking about, if he imposes huge tariffs not only on Canada but countries around the world, prices will soar for working people in this country. And obviously, at a time when a lot of folks are already in economically struggling, that's the last thing that we need.
I agree. And I think it's really fair of you, Senator, to point out that you don't know exactly what it means because you don't know exactly what Donald Trump's going to do. And that's a really fair comment. I was just thinking, though, that whatever the details are, the general thrust of what he wants to do, the general idea of what he wants to do, imposing tariffs is going to hurt. Like, that general idea would hurt working class people. And when you mentioned fair trade versus free trade, I was really thinking, like, that's what trade should be about. How does it benefit the working people, not the billionaires? And what strikes me, we've got a conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, who does the same thing, kind of puts himself out to be a fighter for the working class. We got Donald Trump, who puts himself out to be a fighter for the working class. But what he actually does directly harms the working class every time. The things that he actually does harm the working people of America, and Pierre Poilievre's ideas would hurt the working people of Canada. It strikes me as very odd and funny that they claim to be one thing, but their actions show the exact opposite.
Well, Jagmeet, that is what historically demagogues always do. And our job is to challenge these guys. Now, I'm not all that familiar with Canadian politics or the current policy debate taking place in Canada. But here in this country, I want Canadians to know, Trump, who claims to be a great advocate for working families, wants to give massive tax breaks to the very wealthiest people in this country at a time when we have unprecedented income and wealth inequality. Now, I don't know what working person thinks that makes sense. And I trust that I know the people in Canada understand that we do not have what you have, a healthcare system that guarantees healthcare to all people. And in order to pay for his tax breaks here, he wants to make massive cuts in healthcare programs for our lower income folks, for people who are in nursing homes, et cetera, et cetera. So I think our job on both sides of the border is to expose those politicians who claim to represent working families, but in fact are really tools of the billionaire class. And what we're seeing in America, and again, I'm not familiar, you'll tell me about Canada, what we're seeing here is never before the likes of billionaires having not only economic power, but political power. You know, we have again, I'm not familiar with Canadian campaign finance rules, but I hope Canadians understand that people like Elon Musk and others poured hundreds of millions of dollars into Trump's campaign and now intend to benefit from his victory.
Yeah, it's scary to see that that amount of power concentrated in billionaires' hands, and it's the threat of it being used, and we're already seeing it happening. But the threat of it being used to the detriment of the working class, to working people, is really scary. We have some safeguards in place where there's not that level of money being spent, but we have that same concern. Like our conservative leader right now that has made it very clear that he wants to attack the things that we are so proud of, our universal health care. And even when it first came in, we always knew that it would be at risk. The first person brought it in was the leader of the party that I represent now. He always warned us that when we bring in this universal health care, there will be vultures circling around, seeing this as an opportunity to make a lot of money, and they will find ways to push back or to break the system. And Pierre Poilievre, recently, you mentioned Elon Musk, he recently was endorsed by Elon Musk. And I made the point to say he's endorsed by Elon Musk because Elon Musk knows that Pierre Poilievre is in the pocket of the billionaire class. He wants to make billionaires even richer to the detriment of the working class. And when asked about that endorsement, the Pierre Poilievre said, "Oh, Elon's a great guy." He called the guy a great guy who wants to, he threatened to take over our country, but also someone that wants to put in place laws that benefit the billionaires and hurt the working class. So it's clear the type of person he is. And as you mentioned, the fear that we have of billionaires having unprecedented power, not just the fact that they have so much wealth, but also starting to have more and more political power, is very scary to our democracy and a threat to working people.
Right, absolutely. And let me just say a word on healthcare. I know there is no healthcare system in the world, not in Canada, not in the UK, not in Europe, not that is perfect. But if anybody in Canada talks to you about the need to move to an American-type healthcare system, let me tell you, fight them back as strongly as you can, because the frustration and the disgust in this country with the system that we have is deeply profound. I know Canadian system is not perfect, but in this country, we are spending, roughly speaking, twice as much per person as you spend. You know that? We're spending, if you can believe it, in American dollars, over $13,000 for every man, woman, and child. And when workers sit down, union workers sit down at the table to negotiate a contract, you know what their employer says? Hey, our healthcare bill went up 10% this year. I can't afford to give you a wage increase. We got 85 million people who have no health insurance or are underinsured, can't afford to go to a doctor. 60,000 die each year because they don't get to a doctor when they should. And over the years, I have led Americans into Canada in order to buy prescription drugs, which cost 1/10 the price that they do in the United States. So work on strengthening your system. But you know, and I know, that healthcare must always be considered a human right, not an entity that people make billions of dollars off, which is what we have here. So continue that fight, and we look forward to working with you to learn from you to incorporate some of your ideas here in the United States.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think people really needed to hear that, Senator. When you were speaking about that, it was really helpful, I think, for the folks who are going to hopefully watch this, because there is a real push going on, particularly by the right wing and the conservative leaders to erode our system. And what they're doing is, Senator, which is it's really insidious of them. What they're doing is they are purposely starving our healthcare system, and they're underfunding it. under-resourcing it. They're allowing more private healthcare to come in, which is also starving from the public system, because then you've got public healthcare workers being pulled into the private system. And then they're turning around saying, oh, the system isn't working.
Okay. Jagmeet, that is exactly, that raises a broader issue. This is what's going on all over the world, not just Canada, not just the United States. So what's going on in the NHS in the UK as well. So what they do is they destroy the system and they say to people, hey, system is not working. You need to move toward more privatization. And that may in fact work for the people who have the money on top, but most certainly not for ordinary people. We're seeing that not only in healthcare in this country, but in public education as well. So let's be clear. And I think this is the issue, the defining issue about how, you may have read President Biden just the other day talked about the United States moving toward an oligarchic form of society. And he's absolutely right. And that is something that I've been talking about for a long time. But it ain't just America. You are looking at a global oligarchy led by people like Elon Musk, led by some of these zillionaires in Saudi Arabia or Qatar, and in that part of the world, all over the world. You have a small number of billionaires who are essentially carving up this whole planet. They're getting phenomenally richer, and working people are struggling, and the poorest people are literally starving to death in Sudan and elsewhere. That is a struggle that every working person in Canada, the United States, has got to recognize.
I think you're so right to point that out. And it's in some ways discouraging to think about it happening around the world, but it's also, there's an element of that encouragement that this is a fight for all of us to be a part of. All workers need to be united in this fight because it is a threat to all of us. I think it's really important. I wanted to talk about maybe some of your ideas, Senator Sanders, on specifically, because our relationship, you touched on it, is so important. Vermont being so close to the United States being so close to Canada, that that relationship is so deep. We are friends, we are neighbors, we are there for each other. It is a important relationship. It's a relationship that people around the world look to with envy, and when they think about how well we get along. And what Donald Trump is proposing is creating some rifts in that and trying to challenge that. I wanted to ask you thoughts on what we could do to fight back against this reckless plan. How could we build alliances that could say, to emphasize the friendship and the fact that we're good neighbors, rather than the division that Donald Trump wants to create?
And by the way, call me Bernie. Okay for me to call you Jagmeet? Is that right?
That's very, very good, sir.
Okay, all right. I think a few of the easy responses to that, kind of obvious ones. Many of the international unions, steelworkers and others, UAW, are strong in both the United States and Canada. But I think it might be a good idea to expand upon that and bring American trade unionists together with Canadian, our brothers and sisters in Canada, to see how we can work together against Trump's reactionary ideas. So I would say an expansion of cooperation between American and Canadian unions would be one place that we can play a role. Number two, and it's just ironic that you raised that question, I can tell you just in Vermont that we have, given the fact that we border on Quebec, we have far too little contact, cultural contact, educational contact with our friends in Canada. And we are working literally as we speak now on improving the opportunity of kids in Quebec to come down to Vermont and vice versa. But I think that should extend all across the border. I mean, here are two great countries bordering each other, and I'm not quite sure that people are familiar with each other to the degree that they should. So I'm a big fan of exchange programs. My city, Burlington, Vermont, used to have an exchange program with Burlington, Ontario, actually years ago.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so I mean, I would like to see that expanded coast to coast. Those are two ideas that come to my mind.
I think they're excellent, and then particularly on the trade unions, on the union and the labor force. I think there is an incredible opportunity there, because many of our unions that are amongst the strongest do have that relationship with the United States and with Canada. So I think there's there's an existing relationship, we can build on that.
Let me mention something else for you.
Yes.
We need your help. And, I am an advocate of something similar to the Canadian healthcare system here in the United States. So actually, as we speak right now, my staff, I'm what's called the ranking member of the health committee, is reaching out to Canadian physicians, and we're going to bring them down, and we have in the past. Because you should know, as I'm sure you do, that Canadian healthcare is attacked here in the United States. I assume that nobody in Canada can ever find a doctor, right? Everyone's dying in the streets. That's kind of what I know that. I mean, you got your problems, obviously.
Right.
I think it's important for the American people to understand how you have historically, or the last 50 years, whatever, been able to provide care to all people, spending half as much as we spend. And I was in Toronto a few years ago, and it blew me away just talking to doctors there. We're saying, we treat all of our patients the same way. We don't have to worry about whether they have this insurance policy or they can afford that. We just treat them. And I often, in my speeches here in America, say if you end up in a hospital in Canada for a month after serious surgery, the bill you pay is maybe for the parking lot where you parked your car, right? And people in America have a hard time even understanding that. So we want to lean on you to help us understand the Canadian system and how you're able to provide quality care to all for half the cost that we spend.
Oh, we can absolutely help you with that. There's a great group of folks that are physicians who are in favor of and want to defend Medicare. And they're a great group of folks. I know them really well. And they're the physicians who believe in their heart that this is the morally right way to do things. That, as you mentioned, anyone can walk into a Canadian hospital and you could be an extremely wealthy professional. You could be a working class person. You're going to get the same quality of amazing care, the top of the line care. We've got a sick children's hospital in Toronto, which is world class. And it doesn't matter who your parents are, how rich they are, how poor they are. If a kid goes into that hospital, they're getting cutting edge, top of the world care to make sure that those kids are healthy again. And it's something that gives me a lot of pride when I think about that. Like,
you should. That's what I was going to, sometimes we take things for granted,
Yeah.
But you should be, as a nation, enormously proud of that. That is a tremendous accomplishment in advancing the human condition. I mean, so I hope all Canadians are proud of that. Obviously, want to continue to make it better and better. We want to fight those who want to destroy it. But take pride in what you've accomplished.
I appreciate that. I want to touch on two more areas. If I could, I guess I should have added on the building alliances. I think it's also important for us to have relationships with like-minded politicians across the borders that we can build together. Yes. And build a movement where we can talk about how we can strengthen our relationship. We can build a brighter future as good neighbors, and one where we lean on that principle of fairness, a fair trade, where it benefits workers on both sides of the border. I really appreciate that sentiment. So I'm in favor of that. I wanted to ask your thoughts, Bernie, on maybe if you could give your insight into it. And I know you've been asked this question before and you've provided really good insights, but maybe just for the folks that might listen to this, your insights on where in the States you feel like the Democrats maybe missed out on speaking to the working class and why that happened. Perhaps a bit of your maybe diagnosis of the problem. I think there's what we can learn from that, because we're in a similar situation where we've got to push back against a right-wing conservative leader who is really appealing to the working class. What are some lessons you think that we can learn from in building a better progressive movement for the working class, for working people, where we could learn from the things maybe you think didn't go the way they should have in the last campaign?
Just to set the record, Jagmeet, thanks for asking that question. I have always run as an independent who caucuses with the Democratic Party. And the reason I run as an independent is I have always been deeply concerned that the Democratic Party has not been as strong as it should be in taking on corporate interest and standing with the working class. So let me just give you a little bit of background how I perceive things going and where we are in the United States. And again, you'll forgive me for not knowing as much about the situation in Canada.
That's okay.
Economically or politically. But here in America, you have 60%. When people say America, oh, you're a wealthy country, right? We're the richest country on earth. Do you know, Jagmeet, that as you and I speak right now, 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck.
Wow.
I don't know if that phrase is used in Canada, but what it means here is you work hard, and at the end of the week, you got nothing left. If your kid gets sick, or if your rent goes up, or if your car breaks down, you got zero. And that means 60% of the people in the richest country on earth, the United States, are living under enormous stress. That's reality number one. And then you got the poorest people who are really struggling. We have a massive housing. Not only do we have a healthcare crisis, which is different than what you have in Canada, because people can't afford to go to the doctor here. We have a housing crisis, which means that 800,000 Americans are homeless. And you got millions of people who are spending 40, 50, 60% of their limited incomes for housing. You got a situation where we have, if you're a working class person in America, sending your kid to childcare. You know what childcare costs in Vermont? I don't know what it costs in Canada.
What does it cost?
$20,000 for a kid.
Wow.
All right. So you're making $50,000 a year. How the hell do you pay $20,000 for one kid? How do you pay for rent and everything else? Meanwhile, while working class people in America are struggling, people on top have never, ever, ever had it so good. There's more income and wealth inequality than ever existed in America. 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. Mr. Musk at the top. All right. Massive income and wealth inequality, massive concentration of ownership. In media, I think this is a Canadian problem as well. What we're seeing is big money people controlling the media, pushing increasingly not only a right-wing line, but massive amounts of disinformation lying. And Musk is at the top of that effort. And then in America, again, different than Canada, billionaires spending hundreds of millions of dollars to elect their candidates. So what the Democrats, I think, have failed to do is recognize the severity of the pain that people are feeling. When Trump goes around the country, went around the country and said, the system is broken. Is it working for you? People say, no, ain't working for me. Can't afford healthcare, can't afford education, can't afford housing. In the last 50 years in America, real inflation accounted for wages have actually gone down for the average American worker. So people are struggling. Trump understood that. Democrats did that. That's one. Second of all, okay, what's the remedy? What do you do? Well, here's where it's tough stuff. You got to have the guts to take on the greed of these very wealthy and powerful corporate interests. And Democrats historically have not done that either. And then as part of that, you come up with what I call a progressive agenda. What is the progressive agenda based on? It says, and this is an important point, at this moment in world history, when you have an explosion in technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, there is no excuse for us not being able to provide a good standard of living for all of our people if that technology benefits workers and not just the billionaire class. So those are some of the issues that we have been fighting for here in the States.
I mean, it was a really powerful summary of what's going on in the States. A lot of parallels to what's going on in Canada. We similarly, while we have some really good social safety net in place, we do have a lot of struggles as well. We are also experiencing an unprecedented cost of living crisis, and particularly a housing crisis as well, where people are spending, like you mentioned, more than half of their paycheck on housing. So that's a similar really big concern. And we also see the housing market itself working phenomenal for big developers and big investors, but it does not work for the working class. And that's something that we've been pointing out. A lot of similar worries about the system not working for everyday folks. You see the billionaire class making more money than ever in Canada. And we pointed out in one of our big issues is the cost of food. And we've got only a handful of grocery corporations that basically run the grocery market in Canada. And they're making unprecedented profits while Canadians are struggling with buying their groceries. So we've been pointing that out. And I think people don't feel like, I think in general, there's a lot of cynicism. They don't think that anyone's going to fix the problems for them because they haven't seen it being fixed before. So part of what we tried to do, and we had an opportunity politically in something which is called a minority government, it gave us more leverage. And so we tried to bring in real concrete changes to people's lives. So we brought in a dental care program. And Bernie, the program helped 1 million people in our country get their teeth looked after. 1 million people were able to go to the dentist. The program should, when it's all said and done, if we can get it to the next phase, cover 9 million. We got 40 million people in Canada. That's almost 1 in 4 person would be able to get this program and get their teeth looked after. And that's a big deal for seniors who came to me with horrible stories where their teeth were so bad that they couldn't eat. They would be in pain if they ate.
Jagmeet, I am so glad. There are some people out there say dental care. What is that about, right? But you are absolutely right. And I talk about that here in this country as well. How do you talk about healthcare without talking about dental care? Right? In the United States, it costs a fortune to go to a dentist. Many seniors, I won't go to the whole song and dance, but I really am glad that you're focusing on dental care as part of healthcare. Excellent.
Yeah, I really think it should be a part of healthcare. So we pushed for that. We got that. We wanted to show working class folks that not only can we talk about solutions, but we can actually get stuff done for you. We can actually concretely make things happen. So we were able to get that. We pushed for a law that would cover diabetes medication for free, as well as birth control. And so that law is there. We're hoping to get some deals signed before the election happens, but that's another concrete thing that we tried to show. If you have someone that's actually interested in the working class, you're going to get policies, you're going to get decisions that improve the material conditions of your life, that actually make a difference in your lives. And so we wanted to show that. That was my hope, was that if we could show that we can make a difference, we can give people that hope that, we can take on these big problems. Look at what we've done here. We can take on those big problems and we can make life better for people.
You made a point a moment ago, which is absolutely true in America, is that people feel are giving up on whether or not they believe government can even respond to their needs. That's what Trump picked up on. How are you in Canada? And we have not solved this by any means. I've tried and step forward and a step backwards. How are you involving people in the political process? When you talk about, you asked me about the Democratic Party, it is no secret. It is a top-down party. Big money plays a role. Consultants play a role. It does not involve at the grassroots level ordinary people. Are you able to address that in Canada? Are you having some success?
I think we could do a better job of it. I think it's something that it's an ongoing struggle, so it's really important. But we do have a very membership-based, our movement is really based on members. And our tradition as a party, we were created by unions and farmers actually came together to create our party. So we've got strong roots in unions. And one of the things that we're really proud of, so I have the party structure, I'm the leader of the party, but we have a party president and then we have an executive of the party. Nearly every single member of my executive, so my president, my vice president, the executive members, nearly every single person in my party, that is the executive body that makes the decisions, that helps direct where we're going as a party, every single member of that executive is a member of a labor union.
Wow.
From the president, who is a former president of a federation of labor representing a province. So she was previously the president of a federation of labor, so that represents all the unions in a particular province. She is my president. My vice president is currently a vice president similar to the American version of the labor movement that represents all of the unions in America. She is the vice president of that for Canada. So we really are proud that our executive body is made up of union members. And so I point to that to say, imagine the type of decisions I'm going to be making as a leader of a party when my party executive is made up of members who are workers themselves. They are union workers.
That's fantastic. And that does not exist in the United States. So congratulations for having that. All right. Well, listen, maybe we should get back to where we started in that we are two great countries. And I think we should also be cognizant of our third country in the hemisphere, Mexico,
Yep.
who we want to work with, and they have new leadership there. But bottom line, we have so much in common. We cannot allow Trump or any right-wing politicians in Canada trying to divide us up. Let's improve our communications. Let's improve our exchanges. Let's get to know each other better. It's been an honor and a pleasure to chat with you, Jagmeet, and we look forward to continuing that.
Well, thank you so much, Bernie, and I'll take you up on that. I think we have a lot to build on. We've a strong relationship, like I mentioned, an envy of the world in a lot of ways. And let's build on that. Let's find ways to build with our labor and our trade union movement that can keep us on the same track. Let's make sure folks like you and I can stay in touch so that we can build that connection over the borders. And I like the cultural exchange idea as well. The more we get to know each other, the better. So I think that's a beautiful idea. So thank you for all that. Thank you for the time. An honor to chat with you, Bernie.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. You too.